All right. HiredUp Podcast, episode number, I think we're up to 4 at this point. We have a guest, Will von Bolton, good friend of ours. Will is a jack of all trades, I would say.
Will of all trades.
Yeah, there you go. Will of all trades. He is a photographer, a videographer, designer, web developer, does consulting, and and is an author. So you have a lot going on, my friend.
I guess so, yeah. I hadn't thought about it before.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I'd love to get into it. So I guess, just kind of start off of, what have you been up to lately? I know that, you do a lot of tour photography. So, with this being 2020 and what it has been, what are some endeavors that you've been up to?
Yeah, well, I've been the last few years, I've been focusing a little bit more on writing. And so my twilight of tour photography is a few years ago. I've been kind of doing a few tours. I did a tour with Jesse McCartney last year, or a couple years ago, and that was my last major tour. But then I did the last couple years, I've been doing, or a couple years after touring, I did a lot of just solitude study, because it was kind of an overcorrection of just being around a bunch of people all day. So I went to, converted my Prius into a living space, and I went to 26 states by myself, just writing every day. And it was just kind of a, really, I think I've just had this really extraordinary life experience. I'm 38 now, and I was about 35 or 36 whenever I kind of was feeling like I needed to transition out of photography. And I just finished Loophole to Happiness, which I had been writing concurrently while I was touring. Loophole to Happiness. It's a 585-word operating system for your mind. And I wrote that while I was touring because, being a tour photographer, I went to 38 countries shooting pop bands.
Right.
And it's the ultimate study of human behavior. And the camera is the ultimate tool to observe human behavior, And so with all those opportunities, I just started noticing if I would write these little lines down, they would help me along the way. And so, and then I had this revelation of a collection. If one line can change your life, a collection can reprogram it. And so that's kind of been my life since then, is kind of articulating concepts. Because the second you articulate a concept, it becomes a tool you can use,
Right.
And it's kind of like being diagnosed. It's there's a relief to that diagnosis, because now it's okay, it's I've related to someone else now,
Right.
And so, and this is the theory that I'm working on, is if you stack all these lines that articulate concepts in the most efficient way possible, then they can create a philosophy.
Right.
So that's the first book that I've come out, and with this concept, it's a 585-word operating system for your mind.
Right.
And so each page is 150 pages, 2 to 9 words a page. Every page represents a line of code in a human operating system.
Right.
And so now I'm working on, kind of a lot of other books. Is an operating system for your body is actually coming on soon, because I gained quite a bit of weight when I was touring. It's it's a study of gluttony whenever you're touring with pop bands all over the place.
Right, of course.
And I went for it. I was like, I'm sure I can fit one more piece of pizza in me.
You never know when the next meal will come.
Exactly.
So.
Well, it's a lot.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's 4 meals a day. But no, it was great, and it was great to kind of live that. I feel like my entire life has been that kind of experience of experience every life experience, and that was my period of gluttony.
Right.
Right. But at coming back from that, I've learned all these little lessons about kind of integrating movement into your day. So you don't necessarily have to go to the gym to lose 50 pounds.
Right.
You can just change, modify your lifestyle just slightly, modify behavior slightly, and then, walk more places, you know what I mean? Sit when you're sitting, sit like this, you're actually working out if you're working out your core like this.
Right.
And so I was extremely lazy, and so if you see your kind of movement, journey as a story arc, I was over here where I didn't want to move or walk half a block, but now I walk 4 or 5, 10 miles a day.
Right.
And then on top of that, now I'm like seeking. So I'm like, let's go walk around the lake. Let's go bike ride. And now I had a personal trainer. Actually, his name's Patrick. He just started. I'm good friends with his wife. I'm actually working on integrated movement with her. And he was like, I just want to like have like 6 months with Will. Can I like train him or whatever? And so I was like, yeah, I'll do some photos and video for you. So I just started seeing a personal trainer a few weeks ago, and I was like, that's been really great. I've never seen like. But I've never been in that place mentally to want to see a personal trainer.
Right.
Because now now that I'm in this part of my story arc, now I'm seeking opportunities for movement, And so yesterday we worked out at Germany Park, if you've ever been there in Dallas. It's incredible. It's like this track that, has this little workout area outside. And so it's just like now I'm experiencing all these life experiences that I wouldn't have wanted to experience as a lazy person,
Right.
Right. And so I'm working on that, and then I'm working on a few other concepts I'm really excited about.
Right.
And so that's what the last few years have been. And then the last year, I moved back to Dallas, so that was a couple years after touring. And so the last year, I moved back to Dallas, and so I have a place for the first time in a few years.
Right.
So it kind of feels like I'm like a wild animal being domesticated. Because, you make a lot of psychological adjustments when you live on the road.
Right.
And I didn't have a place. And so I was married and divorced. And so after I got divorced, I just went all in touring. And so the tail end of that was like a really interesting, progression over the last year of just, okay, how do I make money, first of all, not touring and all the other things. And so that's kind of where the consulting variations of what I've been doing is coming in.
Right.
A good friend of mine, Darren Martin, incredible business author and speaker. His book's called A Company of Owners. He has a lot of books, but his most popular book is called A Company of Owners. But he's like my closest friend, mentor. It's actually how I met Evan. So a really incredible guy. But forgot why I brought him up, but had a purpose to that.
Yeah, well, you move back to Dallas, getting domesticated.
Oh yeah. And so and he's a consultant. He's a business consultant.
Right.
And so he kind of had me along for a few jobs, and so he did the business side, I did the creative side.
Right.
And so it introduced me to that world of just like, okay, how do you kind of transition from this kind of extraordinary tour photography world into doing kind of the things that I used to do a long time ago, which is like web development, design, branding, and all these other things. And so that's what this last year has been, kind of just figuring out how to do this in a sustainable way where I'm able to make money and still have time to like come back to the books that I've been working on, and so that's where I am now. It's just, so I'm finally at that place where I have some time. I'm actually about to take a couple weeks just to myself because I have so many books that are just almost there. I just need some just intentional time with.
Right.
And so next year I'm really excited. I want to put out a couple books at least, and then I'm also working on the audio book for Loophole to Happiness. It's going to be on a vinyl, and so it's 18 minutes.
I love that.
So if you listen to it, you can walk a casual mile at times a casual mile.
Right.
But yeah, it has like an art box with it, and so it comes with like 5 posters that have the different sayings on them, and some pieces of art that I actually did, some paintings that I did on the back of them. So,
Right.
But yeah, so I'm real excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, brother, you just went through a whole lot there.
I blacked out. I don't even know what happened.
So I'd love to kind of like take a little step back, because just kind of start off, because especially in 2020 right now, I'm a huge fan of EDM music, for instance, and a lot of great DJs, and this whole year, because you've talked about just at that stage in your life, constantly being on tour, and you kind of have a completely different mindset to be able to do that. And I know for a lot of these DJs, for instance, and they're constantly on tour for years and years and years, and all of a sudden 2020 comes, and it's just, okay, I have to stay put, and your whole mentality has to completely shift. And there's and not just with touring, but a lot of people who are constantly on go mode all the time.
Yeah, and also just if you can imagine the experience of being on stage, and if you can equate that to a drug, you get this you expect this is part of your life now. Your cycle of expectation is having this high every night of being, and it's part of your value as a person. It's part of your identity to be on the road and do all these things, and then all of a sudden it's taken out from under you. And I have so many close friends that that I have so much empathy for, because their entire identity has been shaken because they can't leave their house, and I love solitude, obviously, but at the same time, like, there's a ratio that we all have, the social to solitude ratio, that I concentrate on a lot. And I realized this whole year I really crave community, and that's like, I have a lot of one-on-one incredible like connections with people, and I'm really thankful for that. But just like that, just going to shows and things, and it's like seeing people that I've known for 15 years, or meeting new people, and just like being around just that there's an abstract just craving that we all have, that is going to be such a great a great release when we're able to just do it without any guilt.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
When we and really appreciating when something's taken from you. Oh my gosh, I appreciate it that much more.
Well, I mean, the Enlightenment happened after the Dark Ages, and so it kind of feels like this is a mini Dark Ages, hopefully in only like a 2-year period. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But I mean, think about just all the the shifts that happened in work and technology, and I mean, HiredUp is just literally made for this. I mean, y'all's app is made for this environment.
Right.
So
timing, divine timing.
Literally, it's perfect. So it's just that it's pushing all the virtual forms of communication, and it's forcing us to really A/B compare which ones are worth it in the future. I mean, they're suggesting like traveling is going to be, business travel is going to decrease, by 50%. I mean, pulled that number out of the sky, but it's it's going to be something, Right. But because it's just not that necessary. And I mean, I've noticed one of the things I've been doing is setting up people's virtual communication systems, just like a better quality camera and a mic, really.
Right.
But just doing that, it really kind of takes kind of the perceived latency almost of the experience. And so I'm involved in a nonprofit called Conscious Coalition, and it's really amazing. They do some water wells in Guatemala and Uganda and Africa, and I also do some leadership training, which is really interesting.
Fantastic. And we'll link all this in the show notes as well.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And it's really consciouscoalition.com. It's worth checking out. It's exciting to be part of that.
Right.
But I forgot where I started talking about that again, but
Yeah. No, that's all right. Well, I mean, because we were talking about everyone's in go mode, and you've equated it to
virtual communication. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and that's all right.
Hopefully, I'll edit this out. I'm just kidding.
We'll do it in post.
Yeah. It makes it more more human, But I had like 3 people at my studio the other day, and I had a 55-inch screen TV with a nice camera on it and a mic in the middle of the room.
Right.
And then we were meeting with 2 people in Africa, and then some people in LA, and somebody in North Dallas.
Wow.
But the higher quality it just felt more real, and it was like, wow, I got a glimpse of the future of just like, I don't know the difference. We just got as much done in this meeting that we would have in person,
right?
Because it was a 400p, pixely image, and it's just you're getting a glimpse of what it could be, but it's getting close. I mean, especially with the holographic, things like that. I mean, it will literally feel like this in the future, potentially.
Yeah, that's crazy. Although I will say that there is something to like, human to human contact and presence there,
But it's interesting too, because like, it's our generation that values that. So it's kind of like the generation that just like to have a physical newspaper.
Yeah, right.
And so it's interesting to think of like, I still absolutely do. I crave it, and there's just something about being in the room with someone and that energy, and literally energy that comes off our organs and our body. There's something there. I feel that but so that's hard to simulate virtually. But as far as like just first principle of exchanging information, getting things done, and it expands our way of communication. Like with HiredUp, like instead of just being a resume, your face says so much. The way your posture is, everything says that's your resume.
Right.
More than what you're reading. Almost, it's just like you get a glimpse of a video of someone. It tells you so much, and not like in a superficial way either.
Right.
Like I'm talking in a deep animal way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Most of communication is nonverbal, right? So.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You get all kinds of green, yellow, red flags. And sometimes and you calibrate. Sometimes they're off. So it's just it's not always the case. But it's interesting.
Absolutely. Well, just kind of piggybacking off, like, everyone's in go, go, go mode, but you mentioned, you very much value solitude. And I feel like that's something that, a lot of people were forced into trying to deal with. I mean, obviously, this year, depression levels have gone up. They're already trending up, loneliness, people on dating apps more than ever, things like that. Have you always loved solitude, or is that a process that you had to go through?
Yeah, I have. It comes from my dad's the same way. My dad, literally, he's a eccentric cowboy that works in a wood shop all day,
Right.
by himself,
Right.
And so I'm not quite as, much as my dad is, but I've always been, when I started doing tour photography, I did it kind of as marketing for all my other design work and development, web development and everything else, because
That's smart.
if I was on tour with some band, all these other people would want to work with me because it was cool,
Right,
I noticed the value of that.
Right.
And so I would pay for myself to go on the road for like 3 days at a time with bands. And then and that was too much for me. Like I was just, but even in my personal life, a lot of times I'm just like, if I go out for 45 minutes, that's my quota. I'm good for like a week, I mean, that's kind of an exaggeration, but not by much,
Yeah.
And so, and I kind of the overcorrection of that, because but as I started touring more, I adapted to the 3 days, and then all of a sudden I'm just on the road,
Right.
and that's just kind of where I am, and I'm around people all the time, and that's reality now.
Right.
And so at the end of that, it was definitely an overcorrection. So my family has a 1,500 acre ranch, and I go out there quite a bit by myself. And so I'd go out there for like a month by myself and just see like my grandfather and the men who work at the ranch a couple times a week, and that was
Right.
it. And the cows, they're pretty awesome.
Right, yeah.
They're good listeners.
Yeah.
No, but yeah. So, and now it's been a little clunky coming back, because I spent about a year almost by myself,
Right.
and collectively.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's about when I met Evan, so he'll know.
Yeah.
I was a little awkward. I mean, still am,
Sure.
and I'm like conversationally, I'm glitchy. Like I literally lose my train of thought, like I do sometimes here.
Sure.
Good save, right? I just,
No,
I just
yeah.
explained it. But yeah, it's given me this whole new respect for like, being around people. Now it's so much more intentional now, and and so I appreciate it. But yeah, I feel for it, because even somebody like me that loves solitude, I crave the community, and plus I'm just such good friends with people that are like that too, that are just really feeling it right now.
Right.
So I'm hopeful that science and everybody, we can come together in the next like 6 or 7 months and just have some kind of semi-normalcy.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all looking forward to that. So you mentioned when you're talking about your past, you mentioned the term story arc. So, and I think that's an important concept, because I think I think everyone is a hero, and I think everyone in their own way, and I think everyone's on their hero's journey, right? It's like, there's that book, A Hero Wears 1,000 Faces, I think it's called, and it just lays out like, everyone has like these similar story arcs, right? In the hero's journey, and I think the difference is that a lot of people don't realize that they're starring in their own movie. And so they are letting someone else direct it, and I think an important, realization for people is to realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm the director, I'm the star, I'm the writer. I can actually do whatever I want. I can start to rewrite this whole thing.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about how you kind of see your story arc, and at what point of the hero's journey you think you're in.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of literally see it because I've been working on a movie called Becoming Conscious for a while, and it's been on the back burner for the last few years, but I need to, it's one of the things I'm excited to pick back up. But it's about the 8 years writing Loophole to Happiness, and so I toured with a pop band called R5, and Ross Lynch is the singer of that band, and but so long story short, I was married, divorced, had an entire story arc during the 8 years writing this book, and also went all over the world.
Right.
So it was a pretty extraordinary life experience, and so I started writing a script about this life experience, right? And if you've ever written a script, highly recommend. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. If you
I have.
It's like 3D diarying. And so if you write the dialogue of someone else, it's an empathy study of that dialogue. And so you start to understand your life in another way, another altitude, right? And it became like an ego study for myself. My name's just Will Andrew Bolton, but I go by Will Von Bolton, and that's an ego study for myself. When I was married, my ex-wife was Beta Von Bergen, and so when we dated, people called us the Von Boltons. And when we got divorced, we're still good friends. She's actually taking my stitches out tomorrow. I almost cut my finger off. She's taking, but we're good friends. But using my name, Will Von Bolton, or using the movie Becoming Conscious, it's an ego exercise for me.
Right.
It's who do I want to be? Right. This is who I want to be.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then do I want to be the hero of this? Literally the hero of the story? Do I want to be a good guy? Do I want to be literally like which character? Like how do I want this movie to play out? Right. And like I have this kind of, I just have this, it's almost just self-righteous feeling that I'm supposed to just have this pure life and and I'm not saying I'm perfect, and I've definitely, but I just strive for this light. You know what I mean? Right. It's like, what if?
Right. Yeah.
and that's my motivation. It's my self-accountability. You know what I mean? Is being this character that I want to be in the movie.
Right. Right.
And so.
Absolutely. And so talk a little bit about what do you think it means to become conscious? What does that mean to you?
It's just, I think, incremental improvements. I mean, it's all a relative term, and that's why it's not, I don't call it conscious. I think enlightenment is elusive. I call it intermittent enlightenment. I feel like a lot of us get glimpses of it. When we're on the beach in paradise and we forget about everything else, we're enlightened for a second. That's what enlightenment is, and in our own ways, I think. That's a glimpse of it, at least, is that not considering anything outside of now in a way that distorts now. Right. You know what I mean? It's just, and so, I think it's a constantly evolving thing. It's, of what you call that, just like, you're going to be somebody different in 5 years, somebody different in 5 years. And so that's the whole idea, is just kind of do that with intention. Right. Be somebody better than you were yesterday, in a way that's not better, but just an improved version and modified. Just like, how can I be better? How can I just, improve the lives of myself and others, and, all the things, Right. It's just, or what do you want to be,
Right.
And then set intention, and then set your standard and what rituals you need to do to get there.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think just the acknowledgement of that is becoming conscious in a way. But I think that, it's all semantics. You can romantically make it anything.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And so let's move to, because you mentioned like interesting marketing techniques, right? So you said you were doing tour photography in order to sort of like promote yourself and your other creative endeavors. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit, because you have a fantastic Instagram, which we'll link in the show notes. Talk to me a little bit how you sort of grew your audience on social media.
I mean, that was just kind of the stars aligned at the right time, because I was a tour photographer with really popular bands, and kind of, it was so casual that they tagged me in all the pictures, and so, it was an immediate, like, just shooting up, followers for me, and to the point where it didn't feel real, and so it's still, I mean, I don't use it as much as I should, because it doesn't feel like real to me, right. Like, and so, but it's really awesome to have that, distribution channel of information.
Right.
But a lot of things that I did learn from touring is it just gets people's attention. When you move, when you're doing things, you have content you can post online. You can do. It's just the story's moving, right?
Right.
So that's kind of what I applied to my writing life. It was like I had this idea because I totaled my other car and I got this Prius. Didn't quite like the color of it, so I was like, what if I paint it black and put Becoming Conscious on it? And I don't know if you've ever like looked up Prius living on YouTube.
I'm not.
It's also on my YouTube channel. You can see a video of my Prius, but I painted it flat black. And Don Ringler Toyota, a really good friend. I grew up with Donnie Ringler growing up, and so that's how I got the car really cheap rate. He hooked me up, and then he also limo tinted the windows for me.
Oh wow!
And then Cortez Collision did a flat black paint job for me, and then I just went on a riding tour. I converted it into a living space, complete privacy, really cool lighting. I had a 23-inch monitor behind the driver's seat, 6'5" bunk. I had a power inverter. Wow. Single burner stove, canopy. I mean, it was a fantasy world. And I went all over the place. 26 states in there, right. And just wrote. I was like, what can come out of me every day? And I had my system of working out, doing this, eating. Went to sleep about 7 or 8. Woke up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and it was just like I would stimulate myself with different inputs, like documentaries or pop culture things or whatever, and just kind of see what triggered in my brain to write about. And I just wrote until I couldn't. Right. And then it stopped, and I was like, what do I do now? Yeah. And so and I was up in Boston too. Because I had this vision to go visit MIT and Harvard. And so just to absorb the environment, Sure. And I did drop off a copy of Loophole to Happiness in their Brain Studies Center and Artificial Intelligence Center of MIT. Yeah, I think MIT. Right. But then it's just all of a sudden my system stopped working. Every day I would do this ceremony, and all of a sudden words would come out, and then it stopped, and so I was like, well, I guess I need to go home now, and so it stopped being such an aggressive part, and that's when I started focusing more on, okay, I've just jumped off a cliff. I need to figure out how to get my financial and get stable again. Right. The Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if I can get my security back. Right. So now, this last year, that's what I've been concentrating on, and I'm just now at this point where I'm like, it's so exciting because my brain is starting to be able to think again. Because when you're so stressed out, you can definitely be, obviously when you're stressed out, sometimes that's when the best thinking comes. True. But also that can disable your frontal lobe so much, sure. Where you're just, okay, how do I survive this next minute, this next minute, and you forget how you can get altitude, Right. And so I'm thankful that I'm just now with this, I've a bunch of clients that have just started, I'm really excited about giving me the security to just think, Right. And so I'm excited to see how that works out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I have some people in my life, and I'm sure you may as well. There's always these people who are like, because I've always been a pretty creative person, myself, like whether it was, shooting video content or, writing, feature length narrative screenplays or any sort. I was a very expressive person, even as a kid. Right. And I'd always have these people that come up to me at one point or another, and they're like, I'm just not a creative person. That's just not me. Right. And I think about that sometimes, and I'm like, I really think everyone is creative. Like, if you're human, you have creativity within you, right? So I'm curious about your take on, how does someone channel that creativity who maybe, think that they're not a creative person or is like stifled in a sort of blockage?
I mean, it's kind of like dancing. If I say that I'm trying to dance, it's harder for me to do it. But if I'm saying I'm trying to move with the music, it's easier. It's like, don't let the word creativity get in the way of it. Firstly, I would say. Secondly, I would say that one of the lines of the book is actually an equation. It's creativity equals challenge plus perspective. And so if you have this challenge plus your perspective, it could be a spreadsheet, it could be anything. It's like, that's what to me, it's semantics of that is like creativity.
I love that.
But then I would also say that, yeah, we are a species of specialists.
Yeah.
And so some of us are meant to not necessarily go to that lane. You know what I mean? As a if you see our species as a collective species, and we all do the jobs that we're supposed to do, there's something that makes us stand up in this lane.
Right.
You know, and so I think, I don't necessarily let it define your identity. You know, just like do what you enjoy to do, and then you don't like use the word creativity to just meet some bar of something you've seen. You know, just do it. If it's a creative outlet, do it, you know, for another reason, and just do it because you enjoy doing it, not necessarily because you want to compare yourself to anyone else.
Right.
You know, that's kind of defeats the point. I saw a quote today. I can't remember who it's by, but it was basically like, ranking is for horses, not creativity. Not
Right.
creative.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen something similar.
I think it was a collective meme that probably went around the last few days, but you know, but that's the case, you know, and obviously there's places for competition and everything. I think because I think competition drives progress, you know, and I love competition internally with myself, but a lot of people love competing with other people.
Right.
And you know, and I did when I was a kid, and I think that it was valuable for me to learn those lessons. And so, but in creativity, like I would just enjoy it, you know, just have fun. And then if you feel called and you're like kind of raised to the top, then make some money doing it. But otherwise, you know, just have fun.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think definitely for a lot, and I speak for myself included, you know, like, you know, we get good at creative endeavor and then we're immediately like, okay, I need to like make money off of it. And it just like, it takes, for me, it like just took a lot of the magic out of it, because I'm thinking about it in such a different way, you know, and really not focusing on channeling that inspiration, but you know, it just seems more physical rather than, you know, I think of creativity as metaphysical, right? That whole process.
Right.
And yeah, I think that point that you made is huge. Like whatever you enjoy doing, whatever creative outlet, because I think in one way or another, we all have some creative outlet that we're doing, even if we might not think it's a quote unquote creative endeavor. But doing something just because you love doing it, I think is huge.
Yeah, I started playing music again. I started playing music when I was a kid, and that's how I started shooting music photography. And it was the same thing. Every hobby I've ever had started making money. I was in a band, and then we did this, and then I started. And so, but I haven't played music in a long time. The last tour I was on, actually sound checked the drums every tour, which was a lot of fun. But that was the most I've played drums in 15 years, maybe. Yeah. But Darren Martin gave me his drum set because he was selling all his stuff to become nomadic, actually, ironically. And but his good friend is J.D. Miller. He's an amazing painter in town and co-owner of Samuel Lynn Galleries, actually. And we started. He connected us both, and he was like, "You two have to start playing music together." And I would have never in my life played music with anybody like in that kind of a blind date setting.
Right.
But for some reason I was like, that does sound fun. And so that was earlier this year, and we've played music almost every Sunday all year.
Oh wow.
And we don't have any goals of doing whatever. It's that pure, like, we play for like 4 or 5 hours, sometimes more on Sunday, and it's just for fun. And there's no expectations of it, and I've grown to really, really appreciate that.
Right.
I think it's something to consider to have as a creative. Is, you know, I call it crop rotation of all your hobbies. Is to have a hobby that you're not trying to get anything out of. Go in it and ego free. Like, what can I just do like to occupy this time? It's the difference between like playing and gaming. It's like if you're playing, like, you don't necessarily have a goal. There's no organized structure. If you're gaming, you have a goal and there's organized structure. Right. Just play, you know, it's like playifying and gamifying life, and kind of just, you know, just using those diagnoses. Right. It kind of helps you kind of figure out which one you want to do.
Absolutely.
You know,
it's kind of like connecting with our inner child more.
For sure, yeah.
You know, it's like as soon as all these structure and these rules come, it's like, it's so stifling.
Yeah.
I feel like
Well, any consideration outside of now too, you know.
Right.
And that's why
Right.
what my definition of pure is like bypassing your ego. And it's like,
right.
That's why whenever I'm writing, I imagine I'm like channeling something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it feels like I am.
Right.
I literally look at my hand and it feels like it's writing itself. Like, but I'm also extremely science-based, reason-based person, and so that's either I'm actually channeling something. Who knows?
Yeah.
If you believe in Wi-Fi, you can believe in anything.
Well, yeah, of course.
And
right.
so it could be, who knows? Or it's a thought shape my brain makes that allows me to bypass who I am. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just kind of just be just a pure reflection of the moment or the stimulation that I'm having from whatever. you know?
Right.
So you talked about living in your car. And how long did you do that for?
Over about a year and a half, I lived in my car and kind of, used the network of my friends as couches.
Wow.
So I called them islands of expansion. All the places I've stayed.
That's not for everybody. Like that's
No,
something
it's not.
that's not for everybody.
It's not. Yeah, it was definitely challenging more towards the end. In the beginning, it was like this incredible exercise to just minimalize my life. Like I put everything in a Prius, and everything I owned is black too.
Yeah, I
Tinted
know.
windows, black, And so now I'm extremely organized because if I put a flashlight here, that's where it needs to be in the dark. And so I've applied that everywhere I've gone. So it's almost like I I miniaturize my life. And now that I have, my loft that I live in now, it's like everything has so much intention.
Yeah, and you're sort of a minimalist too. Like
yeah.
you don't have many. Like
for sure.
You're down to the bare essentials, which
Yeah.
I like.
Yeah, it's nice, and everything I do have is very intentional. One of the lines of the book actually is admire, selectively acquire.
I love that.
And so it's just, I think, as you grow up, you go through a few purges, and it's just like the whole idea of spring cleaning. It's
Sure.
just like every once in a while, just like reassess is like, what do I want to drag with me, forever?
Right.
Yeah. And there's not that much that you necessarily need, unless you just happen to have just a ton of, storage somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. You talked about when you were living in your car, you would go to bed every night at 6 or 7. And then even now you're training, you have a system for that. It seems that there is a large factor of habit that goes into creativity. And so we talk about this in the company all the time that, sure, we can have things that we want to do and that we create these visions and goals and things like that. But it really takes a defined process of a thing that you do every single day in order to get something creative a lot of times. It actually takes sitting down and just talking and talking into a mic or taking pictures every day, even sometimes when you don't want to, or even when it's not working and you may have some writer's block. Do you see that there's a large factor or a much needed factor of just habit that goes into creativity?
Well, yeah, I think so. And I'm kind of actually trying to step away from that as much.
Interesting. Okay.
So, but yes, it's almost like hocus pocus, like a spell, right? It's a series of words that make something happen.
Yeah.
And so that's the way I've kind of seen my creativity. It's almost like this happened. This combination of actions worked a few times. Let's make sure it happens again, Yeah. But then it got to the point where it almost, sometimes the ceremony, you just only pay attention to the ceremony and you forget why you're doing the ceremony. So I think it's a combination of that answer is like, I think that it almost like intermittently you do. Like you find periods of ceremonies within your life.
Sure.
But you kind of have to keep, or at least my style is kind of modify them slightly so it keeps everything fresh. Like I'm trying to sleep in later, like, cause it's just a really challenging lifestyle to live when you're not living in your car by yourself.
Yeah.
Going to sleep at 6 o'clock and wake up at 2 or 3. It's just not a very functional, like, whenever you're dealing with other people.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't really work when you're up at 2.
And so I'm just doing everything I can to, like, modify my sleep. But what I've noticed, I don't push as hard in the morning. But I get, like, as much, if not more, done just because I don't put as much pressure on myself to get as much in the morning.
Gotcha.
So I do stuff kind of during the day. And I mean, there's still those like creative periods where like I feel like, you know, if I have like a project I need to get done, I'll wake up at 3 or 4 because I know that's when my brain is going. Like,
Right.
you know, because if I wake up then you can work for 3 or 4 or 5, 6 hours before most people get started.
Even wake up.
Right. And
Yeah.
so, and there's something psychologically, it's just like driving. If you have a long road trip, like I highly recommend driving before it gets light. Because right when it gets light, you get another push. And it's like you
Yeah.
start, if you leave at 4 o'clock in the morning and you're like 2.5 hours later, it's like, oh, it's morning again. It's like,
Yep.
it's like you just started driving. And so it's just all about like, you know, kind of like embracing those little observations, I think, and just kind of using them when they are still functional and being aware when they're not.
And being okay with moving on
Yes.
and changing up that process.
Not forcing, you know, one of the lines of the book is what works now should not be forced later. It's like, okay, it used to work, and just don't put so much of your ego on it working. It's like, okay, it used to work, and everything's different now. And it's like, okay, let's see what works now, you know?
Do you have every line of your book memorized?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty much. I mean, sorry, it would be hard to, you know, recite 150 and, you know, and,
Yeah.
you know.
But you have it all down.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, it's the way I think. You know, that's my philosophy. It's like that, and so I reference it a lot because it's literally the way I think. Those are, yeah, and that's the whole idea. Is it's you know, if you can articulate these concepts in the most efficient way possible, it's the way that you'll start thinking too.
Yeah.
Even if it's different than this, you know, it's like create your own.
System.
And it becomes, and that's what I say with, you know, anybody in business too. This is the most efficient way to think is the way I say it, because it allows you to understand what to do if you're hot. You know, that to me is like, so you have 3 options: go adjust the thermostat, get over it, or complain. You know what I mean? And so it's like, that's kind of like a guide of which one, you know, how do you deal with that?
That's so great. And you've taken a lot of those concepts. But the last thing I want to ask you about is your coffee company, to me, kind of came out of nowhere. Like that was a little bit out of left field of what you usually are doing, but I think it makes perfect sense for you.
I've been working on the concept for about 5 years actually.
Wow.
And then I happened to meet, I was dabbling in potential venture capital world on another branch, you know, about a year ago. And I met my partner, Michael Bezdek, and he happened to meet, he was in Guatemala for Conscious Coalition, which is the nonprofit.
Gotcha.
And so he was in Guatemala and met Giovanni Levis, which is our other partner, and his family has a Levis family farms in Guatemala. Like this, all the beans are like 6,000 foot elevation. It's just like the highest rated beans you can get. And then he's in like artisan roaster, and he just got approved to be in like Whole Foods and all that.
Wow.
You know, I mean, that, not to even demean him, and he's
a big deal.
He's all, and you see it in his eyes. He's just an artisan guy, you know.
Yeah.
And so that just kind of wound up working. But the whole concept of becoming conscious, the company that I'm, you know, working on is using cultural distribution. It's like every one of these lines and the lines of the books that I'm working on, it's like just to put them out there, whether it's literally on coffee bags, T-shirts, just whatever. Yeah. It's just to surround people by these ideas, and then, you know, and really the long-term goal is to create, which I didn't even go into because there's a lot, but the long-term goal is to create an artificial intelligence company, because each one of these lines I'm writing, I represent a line of code in a human operating system, but in theory they could represent a line of code in the way a computer thinks as well, or processes decision. And so that's the whole idea, is just basically culturally just drown everyone in good, you know, using all these like advertising techniques and communication tools that are available now for good, you know, instead of like in such a what's the, you know, the word, just the dark way, you know.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What I'm curious about, you know, this would take longer, so I know you only have about 2 minutes, but what's your whole idea here is so good. And the way that you think, it's all about goodness, like you just said. It's all about just being a good person. What's your take on the status of the world right now?
Man, if you look at the yin yang logo, it's like it needs evil for good and all the things. I mean, evil's, you know, a loose word I'm using now without thinking it through. But I think there's just some forces happening. It feels like that there's going to be an overcorrection, and I think this period right now is the ultimate mirror of who we are right now. We have all these tools and all this information, and that's where it is right now. Is everyone's surrounded by information bias bubbles, confirmation bias bubbles. I want to be around people that agree with me. That feels good, and then the advertising algorithms are made to surround these people with that, and then reinforce the all the polarized views and polarized realities, and no one's necessarily good, not necessarily good or bad. Most people are not necessarily good or bad. It's just people are acting on the information they have and the information spheres that they're in and the people they're around, and people want to believe it's amazing what people can believe when they want to. And so many people right now are just kind of in this kind of denial phase and that's kind of where we all are now, is like trying to figure out how do we recalibrate reality, that we don't have like 3 news networks anymore. Now we have thousands of people trying to put information inside your head that all have interest involved, that may not necessarily be benevolent.
Yeah.
And so it can get dystopian pretty quick, but, I'd like to think that, I think the light's going to shine through, and I think that we can use all the tools that we're learning and on the dark side to use them, and just kind of, there's a balance that will always be in perpetuity. But yeah, it just kind of starts with you and just maintaining giving surplus yourself, and then wish for the best.
Yeah, I'm with you.
For sure.
Well, listen, I think you're awesome.
You too.
I'm so grateful for you.
You too.
Really, really am. I love your way of thinking. I've always been just very admirable of the way that you process things, and you're just a good guy.
Thanks,
and
sir.
so
You
thank
too.
you for coming on, and thank you for continuing to put out the work that you do. It's so beneficial to people, and people need it. So thank you for everything that you do.
So why don't you just tell people where they can find you online and find Loophole to Happiness? Is it on Amazon or?
It is on Amazon. Also willvonbolton.com, and youarebecomingconscious.com. And then also have some coffee. It's all on the site. We're doing a limited edition coffee bag, so lines of code on every bag of coffee. I'm really excited about an amazing Guatemalan coffee that's roasted, like artisan roasted. You get it within like 4 days of it being roasted, I believe. So it's really amazing. So we have like about 50 or 60 more bags of those left, I believe.
Right,
so yeah,
right. Fantastic. Well, we'll definitely link all this in the show notes, and so people know where to find you.
Awesome. Thank you all
All
so
right,
much.
brother.
And I love
Thank you.
HiredUp. It's awesome. I'm excited to see where you guys
thank
go.
you. Yeah. It's definitely coming along, and as of right now, the app is going to be out very, very soon. So we're super pumped.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, brother.
All right, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Take
Sure.
care.